now. Can everybody on the line hear? Hopefully so. All right. So welcome everybody to the Applied Research Grant Program Information Session. My name is Stacey Shipwright. I'm the research analyst here at the Applied Research Center, and this is a fund that I project manage. So each year there's a call twice each year for applied research proposals. The grants are typically an investment in faculty, staff, and students, and it's for people who have an interest in research, who have a project idea that they want to investigate, or they just want to enhance the student experience. So the projects themselves fund up to $10,000 per project. However, the steering committee who looks at these projects will grant up to $20,000, but there has to have a really strong rationale. There has to be an industry partner or community partner, and there has to be a lot of student engagement. So it needs to be a very, very strong project in order to be granted up to $20,000. So we actually have 3 different programs that we fund. There's the Applied Research and Innovation Fund, and that's for faculty and staff to conduct research projects. There's the Multidisciplinary Research and Innovation Fund, and that's for 2 schools or 2 departments to collaborate on an applied research project. And we also have a Student Research and Innovation Fund, and that's where students can apply for some funding to conduct research under the supervision of a faculty member. So some of the project types that we see are proof of concept or prototype development. We see case studies, feasibility studies, educational research. But regardless of the type of project, it has to be an applied project. So it needs to solve a practical problem or improve a process or a product. People who are eligible to apply: full-time and part-time faculty, admin staff, and support staff. And then for the student research fund, any Centennial College student is available, is applicable to apply for that. So what do the grants fund? So primary expenses that the grants fund are faculty relief time, research assistance, and student stipends. And then some of the secondary expenses that the funds will grant are for technical services, software and equipment, books and materials, reference materials, and that's materials that aren't already available at the college. And just a note about materials: anything that is purchased and not consumed becomes the property of the college. So some of the things that aren't funded are office equipment, so you can't go out and buy computers or tablets or smartphones, memberships in professional associations, legal fees, capital expenses, so you couldn't take this money and go build a building in the parking lot. The funds won't grant that. Conference fees and travel expenses aren't covered either.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
The funding that's based on $20,000 per project, you said the community or an industry partner needs to be involved?
Yes.
Is that is the concept that works well with the 2 organizations, or is it that we need to do it? Is it possible for us to search a specific organization, or would that be considered under that $20,000?
No, you'd have to be teamed up with a community or an industry or an educational partner. So if you wanted to team up with U of T, for instance, to do a research project, and that would be an educational partner that would be on board the project.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Does that mean that they provide some of the funds and you guys provide some of the funds, and that's why it's $20,000, or does Centennial cover the funds? We just have to have a partnership.
Centennial covers the funds. You just have to have the partnership. However, if the partner wants to put in some in-kind or some cash, that's looked upon favorably. So if your partner wants to participate in that that way, then the steering committee that looks at these applications looks at that very favorably.
Okay. And what, sorry, I'm going to ask another question. What is the required contribution of the partner?
There isn't a set amount. So
not financially. What's their contribution in terms of like what's their responsibility in partnering? So for instance, say I had a faculty member from U of T who partnered with me. Would that be considered a partnership?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So it's their in-kind time and resources.
Right. Okay. Gotcha.
Yes. So some of the project criteria, projects have to be 1 year in length. They can't be any more than that. If you have a longer-term project, it has to be approved by the steering committee. And if you have a longer-term project, you might want to split it up into phases. So phase 1 could be for this funding call, phase 2 could be for the next funding call, and so forth. You need to include student researchers where applicable. So having students on your team doing some of the work, whether that's doing data collection, data analysis, having them involved in some fashion. Yeah.
Do you guys have a pool of students that you employ for co-op purposes, or is it that we pick whatever students we want and they have to be Centennial students, I'm assuming?
Yes, they have to be Centennial students, and it's up for the individual investigator to hire the students. So we do have some students that we do use that we've used on various projects, and they're kind of repeat students, which we can make available to you. But ultimately, it's up to the principal investigator to hire a student for their project.
And if you do hire students, because they have to have some knowledge of research, right? And some like research skills.
Some do and some don't.
So you guys have a pool that may, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. We do have a pool of students that do have some research skills. So projects also have to be relevant, obviously, so they need to respond to an identified need or a goal. There is some monitoring to the project, so high-level monitoring occurs here at ERIC, and what I do is I look for things like interim reports and final reports and just check in to make sure the project's on track. But ultimately, it's up to the principal investigator to make sure that their project is moving forward so that they can meet their deliverables. Your project also needs to align with the college's strategic plan. So there's the Book of Commitments Part 2 that's available on the college's website. So you need to take a look at that and make sure that your project is aligned with those commitments. Research capacity. Your project should develop some sort of research capacity and enhance the reputation of the college. Something that we also look at is future growth. If you're partnering with an industry partner or community partner, we like to see projects where there could be an add-on or some sort of a future collaboration. And then infrastructure and equipment. Your project should not require additional college infrastructure beyond what the grant allows. If you need something additional, then you do need to get some approval for that. So, for instance, if you needed a chemistry lab or a simulation lab, you would need to get approval to use those sorts of resources because sometimes there's a monetary value applied to them. So we'll take a look at the application and the application guide. And I sent this out earlier to the folks on the webinar. So if you have that handy. So we'll take a look at the application itself. So the front page is pretty self-explanatory. Obviously, you're going to include the title of your research project. And the title should accurately describe your project and not be a very long title. So it needs to be very concise and describe your project. Next is the information about the principal investigator. So if you're applying for this fund, that would be you. We also require the information about your academic manager. So their information is required. And then your research team. So if you are going to be, if you're a faculty member and you're going to have other faculty members as part of your team, you need to include their information as well. and then any industry partner or community partner, you need to include their information and a little bit of a bio about that particular partner. So we just want to know who they are, just a brief description.
Is this form available online? Can we just type it?
Yes, it is available online, and it's available if you go to the college's main website. You'll see on the external, it's the Applied Research Center, and it's under grants. So all of the documents are there for download. The next section of the application deals with the abstract, the key objectives, and the research date. So when you're looking at your abstract, it's really a brief summary of your project. And it's very brief. It's 200 words maximum. So really what this is, it's a communication so that I can tell people about your project. And it summarizes a lot of the major elements of your research, including your research problem, and a little bit about how you're going to tackle that problem. So it's really a communication device so that I can tell other people what your project is about, and they'll understand what I'm telling them. And there's some sample abstracts available that are in a package, but I can send them to the folks on the webinar as well. The next part has to do with key objectives. So this is really what you intend to achieve by conducting the research project. So, and just to keep in mind that it is an applied research project, so it needs to focus on solving a problem or improving a process or a product. And your objectives should yield information about the problem that can aid in potential solutions. So some things to remember about objectives is that they should be clear and understandable to others. So when somebody is reading your application, they should be able to clearly understand what your objectives are. They should be interesting, not just to you, but to other people as well. So they should also be researchable. So they should allow for the development of a research design and the collection of data. So this really means that your objectives shouldn't be so abstract that they can't be researched. They should be appropriate, so in line with the criteria of the application grant. So really what this means is that they should respond to an identified community need or an industry need or a need within the college. They should be manageable, so they should be in scope. You don't want to take on more than you can chew. You only have a year to complete this project, so your objectives should be manageable within that amount of time. They should be worthwhile. I think that's fairly self-explanatory. They should yield meaningful results. Your objectives should be relevant, so they should in some way relate to established theory and research. They should make connections. They should also demonstrate how the research contributes to the knowledge that's already available. They should be narrow enough to focus your project, but not so narrow that the results have no generalizability. And at the same time, they shouldn't be broad enough so that you can't generalize. So not too narrow, not too broad. The next part of the application deals with research ethics. So if you're going to be conducting research involving human beings, you need to have ethics approval to do that. And the ethics application and all the documentation is available on our website. And there's lots of educational tools and examples to help guide you through that process. There's also a section about intellectual property. So for this particular grant, any intellectual property developed is the property of the college. However, if you're working with somebody where this is not going to be the case, then you need to detail what that agreement looks like in this section. And we do have some legal documents and some guidance in the intellectual property area if that's going to be a concern. So next is kind of I like to call it the meat and potatoes of the...
Sorry, the intellectual property only needs to be filled out if you have other parties and what the arrangement would be, right?
Yes. Generally, if you're working with an industry partner, and you're developing a product or you're improving on a process, and some of the IP needs to be held by the company you're working with, then you would need to outline that in this section. And we do, as I said, we do have agreements that we have industry partners sign. Typically, what the college likes to see is to have to be able to use whatever's produced as part of their teaching. So having a royalty-free license, and then also that if it's a product that goes to market, that the college has paid back their initial investment in that particular product. So it's a standard agreement, and if that's the case, then we have the resources here at the center to help guide through that process. So kind of moving now into the detailed proposal plan. We start with the background, and really what the background is a statement of your particular research problem, and it should explain why your study is worthwhile, what you hope to learn, what it will add to the existing field, and what sorts of new perspectives it will bring to the area that you're researching. So it should be an area that is very concise, and it should really, when somebody is reading this, it should tell them why your project is interesting. We also require you to do a literature review in this section.
Can I just ask, if this project were for moving a product forward,
yes.
How does that fit in terms of this background? Because you talked about research and study and all that. What's the hook for developing a product? Like, how do we sell it to you and your people so that it's worthwhile?
So you would talk a little bit about maybe the background of the product, what the use of the product, why what you're doing would be useful in terms of moving that product forward. You can draw on any available literature that might be available around that particular product. And really what you're doing is you're trying to basically sell your idea, sell the product and the improvements to the product.
So if it's envisioned that the product eventually goes out to the community and we release it,
yeah.
What does the school look for as a benefit for funding that? How do I position it so that the school sees that we've got a benefit even though we're developing it and then sending it out?
Well, the benefit is to the faculty, it's to the students that are involved in the project, and then it's the reputation of the college as well. So that's the benefits that we're looking for. So one of the benefits could be bringing back that knowledge that was generated into the classroom, and that's a benefit to the college.
Would we then look for being able to, on the final product, say the software piece, right? Having some recognition of centennial development against that product, even though we're not involved with it anymore? Would that be a good saleable piece?
Yes, that would be a good piece. So having Centennial College acknowledged in some way would be a sellable piece.
Okay.
So in the background information, we require, as I said, a little bit of a literature review. So really, your background should include a brief summary of the literature on your research problem. And what we're looking for is, as I said, a brief summary of what exists, where your project fills a gap, any sorts of framework that is available that you can establish the importance of your study, and any sort of benchmarks. Has everybody done a literature review before? So it's not breaking news. So some little tips about doing a literature review, just to refresh your memory. Some things to look for: keywords. You need to do a library search, skimming articles, doing a literature map if that's helpful for you, drafting summaries of relevant articles, and then assembling your literature review as part of your background.
The literature review is included in the application?
Yes. and as part of your background. So some things to pay attention to are the reliability of your sources and the date of publication. So we like to see peer-reviewed as much as possible and looking for the most relevant in terms of time or date. For publication, we don't have a standard. You can't go, prior to 2009. So we like to see the most up-to-date relevant information. If your particular project doesn't have any recent developments that are published, then going further back into the literature is fine. So the next section is the research methodology section. This is a section that you really need to take careful note of because it's one of the sections that tends to be rather poorly written. So basically what your methodology is, it's your work plan. And it should detail exactly what you plan on doing so that somebody who's looking at your methodology can take your methodology and duplicate your study. So you need to consider the design of your study, your participants, how you're going to recruit participants, who the participants are going to be, your materials, your procedure, and then how you're going to analyze your data. So as I said, it should be a step-by-step guide as to how you plan on conducting your research. So research methodologies, you could be doing a quantitative study using surveys, then collecting that sort of data, or it could be a qualitative study where you're doing interviews and your data collection is thematic, looking at categories. Or you could do a little bit of both, a mixed method study, which a lot of the studies we see tend to be more mixed methods. So looking at the rest of the application, so looking at equipment and infrastructure, as I mentioned, if you need any sort of equipment or infrastructure beyond what is put in your grant, then you need to have approval for that. And as I mentioned, that's things like the simulation labs, the chemistry lab, if you need to use any of the robotics labs, anything along that line, you do need to have approval to do that. You need to provide a work plan or a timeline, and basically what this is asking for is the steps and the timing of your deliverables. So we're not looking for exact dates. We're just looking for generally a month that you plan on completing a certain deliverable. So if you're going to be doing a survey, it might be December survey. So it just needs to be a step-by-step timeline about when you're going to finish certain elements of your study. Interim deliverables. What we ask is by the midway of your project, what will you have accomplished? And that's what a list. We like to see a list of what is going to be accomplished by that midway point. And that falls into the next part, which is the interim report date. So we let you choose when the midpoint of your study is going to be, and we ask for a date when the interim report is going to be delivered to that date. And if we don't get your interim report by that date, then I send out nagging emails. So it's a really short report, and it just basically asks if you have completed your deliverables, if you have had any challenges. It takes 5 minutes to complete, so I do look for that by the date that you specify.
Is there any template for that report?
Yes, there is, and there is a template for that report, and I do send it out.
Okay.
Expected outcomes in future research. In this section, you should outline what you expect to discover from your project and any future or follow-on research. So this could be if it's a multi-phase project, you could outline phase 2, phase 3. If it's not a multi-phase project, but there's some sort of a future study that could be done depending on what you expect to find, then you can outline that in this section as well. We also look at follow-on funding. So projects should be building research capacity, and it should be able to move as I was mentioning, into future research. So what we ask you to do is to take a look at what's available in terms of external funding. So whether that's from foundations, whether that's from some of the major granting agencies through the government like NSERC or SURE or CIHR.
I thought we weren't available. We're not eligible.
Yes, we are.
We are?
Yes. We're eligible for NSERC, SURE, and CIHR grants.
We are. I didn't know that because I was looking at their website this summer and they were saying they had a list of academic institutions and Centennial was anonymous.
Yes, we are eligible.
So that's something we just
A couple of years. We have a couple of NSERC grants. We've applied for SURE grants before, and we've had CIHR grants in the past. So we are eligible.
CIHR, what's that?
That is Canadian Institutes of Health Research.
Have we had any SUREs at the college?
I don't believe we have had a SURE. I think we've had somebody apply for one, but they were not successful. But we are eligible to apply.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
I got faculty that apply and have been successful, but not to the college.
Not through the college? Right. Right. We are eligible though, so we just ask that you look at some external funding that might be available for follow-on projects. Next is the benefits of the applied research. This is the benefits for two areas. One is for the college itself. So you want to speak to the benefits to the college, to faculty, to students. And the benefits of the applied research should be in line with the college commitments. So we have the new book of commitments. I believe there's 8 commitments. So you need to match up the benefits to the commitments. Quite easy to do. The commitments are self-explanatory, and it's just you just need to match up to at least one of them. And the book of commitments is available on the college's website. The next part of the application is the budget. So when you're completing your budget, keep in mind what is funded and what isn't funded. So some people like to sneak in some of the things that aren't funded into their application, but we do note that. When calculating things like release time, you need to calculate fringe benefits. There is actually a formula on the application itself that will show you how to calculate salary costs. So please do use that formula that's on the application. In terms of using student researchers, we pay our students a minimum of $15 an hour. That's the going rate for student researchers here at the center. So anything below that will get sent back. Anything above that, there tends to be a little bit of an issue. So if you can keep them at $15 an hour, finance is happy, the center is happy, everybody's happy. So some of the things to think about for your budget are things like release time, student stipends, amounts for student researchers, office supplies, technical services. If you need to use a statistician, for example, as part of your project, that's something that you could build into your budget. But just keep in mind that for the most part, budgets are $10,000, so that money goes really quickly, especially when you're paying students and then calculating some of your release time into that. The last part of the application is also very important, and that's the signature page. Applications that aren't properly signed are not even considered. So they don't move forward if you don't have all of the signatures in place. And your application has to be signed by yourself, your academic manager or your chair or your coordinator, the dean, the industry or community partner if you're going to be working with one. And I believe that's it for signatures.
Yeah, I have a question about the salary for faculty. How do you mark it per hour?
So it's per hour is how for a contract person. So how much would it cost to have somebody come in and teach
What
yours?
rates do you use? The partial rate, the sessional, or the part-time rate?
Usually the part-time rates.
45 to 50.
The 45, yes.
And how about full-timers?
44.
So basically the backfilling.
The backfilling of the
position is at part-time rate.
Yeah, so that's what they're looking for. So some of the things that we see that are common mistakes of the applications is that there's the research problem isn't very clear. It hasn't been clearly stated, and that tends to be a problem because if somebody is reading your application and doesn't actually know what your project is about, that's a problem. Framing your research problem within a long-winded literature review. The literature review is quite short. We're not expecting thesis level, 50 references. 5 to 10 is fine, and really, making it very concise, and then framing your research problem within that concise literature review. Failure to demonstrate the significance of the research proposal. It might be interesting to you and it might be significant to you, but you have to make sure that you're conveying that significance and that relevance to somebody else. As I mentioned, vague methodology. This is a section that, as I mentioned, is very poorly done, the methodology section. When we see applications that come to us that tend not to be successful. So you need to make sure that your methodology is as detailed as you can possibly make it. Inadequate consideration of ethics. So we do see some applications that come through that are using human subjects, and they've indicated that they're not going to go through ethics. So it's something to keep in mind. And then poor writing style, which lacks clarity and precision. So sometimes we get applications that are very poorly written. Have somebody else take a look at your application, make sure that it makes sense to them, so that when somebody else is reading it, it makes sense to them as well. So once you've submitted your application, it goes to a steering committee. And the steering committee is made up of deans, chairs, coordinators, other researchers. They read each application, and then they decide whether a project is a go or a no-go. And the applicant then receives a letter on behalf of the steering committee letting them know if they were successful or not in being awarded funding. So there's two streams when it comes to actual funding. So there's the unsuccessful stream, and basically what the steering committee comes back with is that your application is unsuccessful, but you should work with the Applied Research Center, and we'll work on the application, fix some of the areas that aren't clear, and then you can apply for the following call. It also may be the case that there's an alternate funding source. So we have various funding envelopes here at the Research Center, and it may be that your project is a better fit under one of the other funding envelopes that we have. So we would work with you to move your project into under one of those under the funding envelope that might be more appropriate. The other stream is the successful stream. It could be that your project is successful, no changes need to be made. It could be that your project is successfully conditionally successful, and you may need to make some revisions. And normally where we see revisions that need to be made are in the budget. Maybe a student isn't being paid $15 an hour, or maybe too much of the budget has been dedicated to release time, and the steering committee feels that some changes need to be made. Or it could be that your methodology wasn't as clear as the steering committee would have liked. So sometimes revisions are required. If you need ethics approval, that needs to be done. Generally, our guideline on ethics is that your ethics application should be submitted no later than a month after your successful award. We also have a memorandum of understanding that we ask each PI to sign. And what this is it goes through your interim deliverables, your interim report date, your final report date, some of the conditions of the of the application itself, so presenting at the Applied Research Symposium. And it's really just a document where we ask you to sign it so that you're held accountable to some of the things that you specified in your application. And then there's my contact information, and I'm the project manager for this fund. So if you have any questions about the process or the application, then I'm happy to answer them.
I just want to clarify a couple of things.
Sure.
First of all, about the ethics. So we will only need to fill out that ethics application form if our application has been approved.
Yes, yes. So if your application is approved and you need ethics approval, then
That will be the next step.
that would be the next step. And ethics is quite quick at Centennial, so it takes about 10 days for the board to turn around an application. There might be some back and forth depending on what's in your application and what the REB feels is necessary. So do calculate a little bit of time for that, but it's generally about 10 days.
And how long typically have previous applications been, roughly just how many pages of paper?
12. Yeah, around 12. It depends. Some people are a little long-winded,
Roughly, yeah.
but roughly around 12 pages.
How many applications do you guys generally get per call out? What's the
So
average?
last call we received 12 applications and we funded 6. Yeah, it also depends on how much funding we have left. So in this call, we'll be able to fund approximately 8 applications at $10,000.
You said the call goes twice a year, so the next one will be?
The next one will be in the spring. So the next call will go out mid-January with a due date the end of February.
Due in October.
This one is due end of October.
And when does the transfer payment take place? When would the project?
So for faculty relief time, generally that's handled during the project. If you're part-time faculty or partial load and you're applying for this fund, then a lump sum contract is drawn, and then you're paid as part of your bi-weekly salary.
So let's say if I'm the chair, I could separate those, like you could say contract person along with the full-time faculty, would I be able to separate those funds that the contract person pays?
Yes, yes. And student hires, so as I mentioned, it's up to you to hire a student. So once a student is hired, their contract is processed through the center, and I take care of things like timesheets, work logs that they have to complete, and just generally working with the students to make sure that they're being paid on time. Is there any other questions?
What's the first step? Are they going to involve in this?
Sure. Support staff can apply for,
The hourly rate.
and it would be their hourly rate. Yes. But no, the support staff can be part of the research team, or they can apply for one of the grants on their own. Are there any questions from the folks who are on the webinar? Take that as a no. Okay. Well, if there's any questions, you have my contact information, and I'm happy to answer any questions about the application, the process. I'm even happy to look at applications. Just don't send them to me the day before they're due. And I can provide feedback on applications as well.